You're tuned into the Growth Ceilings Podcast, the show for builders, dreamers, and leaders ready to break limits and grow beyond what they thought possible.
Welcome to the Growth Ceilings Podcast. I'm your host, Jim Lovelady, professional EOS implementer. EOS stands for the Entrepreneurial Operating System. This show is about real conversations with leaders who bring clarity to complex challenges and help organizations operate with confidence. Today, I'm joined by Mark Sutter. Mark is a fractional sales leader with nearly 30 years of B2B sales and sales leadership experience. He helps CEOs diagnose sales problems, rebuild sales infrastructure, and create sustainable performance improvement. Mark, welcome to the Growth Ceilings Podcast.
Jim, it's great to be here, and thanks for having me here today.
A thrill. You're my first podcast of 2026. Let's get started.
I love it. Let's go.
You say leaders wait too long to fix sales problems. Why does that happen?
Well, oftentimes they don't really understand the root cause of a sales problem, right? So they're tracking some metric and they think perhaps that the deal sizes are too small, for one example, right? But it's not serious. So that goes on and on and on. And what they don't really see is that there's a broader problem upstream, possibly. They might be calling on the wrong customers. They might have the wrong messaging. And because of all that systematic issues with their sales approach, and in this example, looking at the wrong metric, they are really possibly missing a lot of a greater opportunity upside than they really realize. And so not having a systematic approach oftentimes hurts them because they're a little bit slow to react to what is a broader problem possibly.
You mentioned deal sizes being too small, and I can identify with this. What other common misdiagnoses do you see in sales performance?
One of the most common issues is that they think that they need to hire a salesperson or that they have the wrong salesperson, but they have no objective way of knowing if that's true. And they may not even know if they even have the right sales strategy. So not understanding the hierarchy of their sales blueprint or even what a sales blueprint might be for them oftentimes misrepresent what the problems could be. And so it could be a lot of issues from deal size to closing the right amount of deals to the wrong person. And you get this frantic issue over time where people start pointing at that problem, and they're just not sure.
So how do weak sales systems show up inside organizations?
Well, weak sales systems show up in different organizations through poor sales performance, poor customer experience, oftentimes dissatisfaction with the salespeople, and oftentimes some turnover, right? So you have sales leaders leaving, you have salespeople leaving. And another place that it shows up is oftentimes is the misalignment of marketing and sales, right? So marketing says we're sending leads and sales is not closing them, and sales is pointing at marketing. So you get this miscommunication and the pointing of fingers. It happens a lot.
I've been there and done that. I've lived through that many times. Completely identify with that. So from your perch, what should CEOs look at before hiring more salespeople?
I would say the number one step is always to assess the current state. So Jim, it's January. Many of your listeners are probably starting a new fitness program, perhaps a new nutrition program. And too often they're jumping into fixing the thing that they think is broken. Step one is you do assessment. You assess your current state of performance. What was the attribution of your performance last year? And oftentimes that's a sticky question to answer because they have poor data or they don't have any data at all. And they're not really sure what their current state is. And without knowing what your current state is, you cannot really set really good goals, right? And without that conversation with the leadership team based on what happened last year and perhaps the last couple of years, you can't have the good strategy conversations of should we grow through existing customers? Should we grow with new customers? Perhaps should we sell a particular new product more so than the other product? You can't do that without understanding your current state and having that dialogue and that discussion. So looking backwards first and understanding your current state and the attribution of what you did last year to drive that performance in the last year or so is really, really critical. And I oftentimes find that that is the number one issue is organizations really don't have a good understanding of where they're at.
Yeah, and you caught my attention with time of year. We have this rut that we get into as business owners, entrepreneurs, business leaders. Oh, it's the first of the year. Let's try to fix the problem. Let's not wait until the first of the year. Let's do this ongoing. Let's constantly challenge ourselves. Let's constantly measure ourselves. Let's constantly have the view and the visibility into where we are at any point in the year versus waiting until it becomes a really deeper problem. And then we try to swarm it all together at the first of the year, but we oftentimes don't correct these things because the problem is enormous and often the case.
Well, that's right. And what got you to 5 million or 20 million won't get you to the next doubling of your revenue, right? And the average sales transformation takes about 18 to 24 months. So
See,
it's already
yeah.
January. And if you're worried about this year's sales number based on what happened last year, you better start now. And really not just to help this year, but really the year after. And so it's critical that leaders start very quickly to understand their current state, understand what the gaps are, and then put in some strategies and processes in place to close that gap over time. Because some of these might involve different people, different systems, different structures, and you got to get started.
I'm really interested in hearing your perspective on this. From your perspective, how does sales leadership differ from sales management?
Yeah. So sales leadership really comes in about picking the right sales strategy in particular. It's also about evolving that strategy over time. It's about coexisting and evolving the leadership team. I think sales management is largely about execution, really helping the sales team execute. It's really about coaching, and it's also about hiring the right people in the right place. But they're both important. And in some organizations, it's in the same person, which can be difficult. In some organizations, the sales leader is promoted into that role and they're not ready for it. It's really important to get that role, both roles, very well constructed. Otherwise, you're in a world of hurt in terms of trying to move the ball forward.
I completely concur with what you shared. So, what role does accountability play in consistent sales execution?
Well, accountability is key, right? In order to have some predictability, right? And accountability is largely about having good expectations, clear expectations. If you don't have a common scorecard or scoreboard, you don't have common language, and you don't have
Right.
a common sales methodology, then oftentimes you get things that are done differently. And it's really almost impossible to scale things that are done by heroic effort. In order to grow, you need accountable systems and you need to grow that system versus these one-off heroic efforts. And so accountability is really about visibility, I would say clarity, and having the right manager and leader coach and make on-spot changes as the quarter evolves based on market and customer feedback.
So, when you start with a new prospect, a new client, how do you rebuild trust in a struggling sales team?
I think a lot of it is doing that assessment work to get agreement and clarity on what is their current state. Oftentimes, when I work with clients and we go through that assessment process to understand where they're at, some light bulbs go off about, oh, okay, that makes sense. We look back and we didn't do enough sales meetings or our discovery calls were poor. And by surfacing the data, it takes the personality and the personal issues out of it and says, okay, well, how do we solve getting more meetings? How do we solve being more productive on meetings? How do we solve the marketing to sales handoff? And it becomes a brainstorming session then about how do we move the ball forward. And so I think getting clarity on the information is really helpful and critical. And it also involves people sharing that information and from different departments, which brings alignment across the organization as well.
So, what habits separate high performing sales organizations?
I would say the consistent curiosity to improve and learn. They're always trying to learn about the marketplace. They're trying to learn from their customers. Most organizations that oftentimes plateau and struggle oftentimes are too focused on themselves and not focused on the customer. And I find one way that I've fixed that recently with a couple customers in the last couple of years is just to do some customer intimacy interviews and them learning from their customers about why they're still a customer, why they bought something, why they didn't buy something. I do think that learning feedback loop from their key customers, it has been a critical component of consistent sales performance of leading organizations versus the organization that is more focused on themselves about, hey, we want to sell this new thing. It's more focused on selling versus helping their customers buy. So if I could leave you with that, it really is about helping your customers buy, which is another way of saying, how do I make my customers more successful? What do they need to grow their businesses? What does their 2026 plan look like? And how can I help?
I got to ask you, you and I are both from a sales and marketing background. As the world turns, AI is everywhere around us. Give me your perspective on what you're seeing, how you're integrating AI into your practice, what you're helping customers to accomplish with artificial intelligence.
Yeah, I think AI can be really helpful in a lot of different areas. In particular, I think the low hanging fruit is around automating some of the admin tasks, particularly about putting notes into the CRM and things like that. It's terrific about research to personalize some emails and things like that. It doesn't take away the human connection. It doesn't necessarily take away strategy, but it is a good, at this point, co-pilot for sales leaders and sales managers and reps. I think there's an evolving practice that's very helpful potentially around the sales coaching part of it. So having AI look at your client meeting notes and video and offer some suggestions. And so getting that feedback from a rep level more immediately versus just the manager doing it in a review is very helpful. And I think it all leads to greater productivity and perhaps some better personalization on the rep side. So we'll see. But I think there's a lot of promise, and a lot of organizations, particularly at the enterprise level, are making good use of it. On smaller organizations, it's been very helpful for things like meeting notes, providing some insights, doing some research to make it more efficient and more personalized from the rep level on up.
What advice would you give a CEO facing flat or declining revenue?
Yeah, I would have them do a deep dive assessment on them, on their current state of sales, and really understand the attribution of last year's sales relative to the year before and the year before, and really get to the level of what was the attribution elements that led to that. Was it not enough meetings, not enough new clients, not enough of whatever? They have to really understand that and then go through the exercise based on that current state that they need to set some realistic goals for the next year to make sure that they could go from point A to point B, and make sure that as part of that assessment, they have the actual capabilities of the talent and the products and services to actually go execute. Once you have a good assessment and you have realistic goals, then the organization can get around the excitement of, hey, we could do this, and then run a good operating system around that in terms of EOS and the sales operating system of a good cadence of quarterly, monthly, weekly meetings, including one-on-ones, to really make it work. And then have that feedback loop to say, hey, we're a little off track here. What is it causing us to go off track? And be able to quickly self-correct for the next quarter.
Bonus thought for you. Can't let you go without this. As you were sharing how you go back and you look at and you're looking for root causes, you're adding up the widgets, what outcomes did or did not happen. That's the quantitative from the way I look at it, right? How do you address the qualitative, like behavior or lack of visibility, lack of traction, those kinds of things?
Yeah, so some of it's old school. I did mention talking to clients, so I'll talk to clients on behalf of my clients. But going on a call with the rep to understand how they conduct a sales call is very insightful about, do they understand how to start a meeting? Do they listen? Do they probe good questions? Do they have a value proposition statement? All those things are really key. And I use that a lot in terms of with my clients of just getting into the weeds to observe how they actually operate and perform on a meeting and in follow up is really key. And I think once you understand the data and then actually how they behave, then you get some good insights about what the gaps are.
Just like this podcast, if I'm not nervous before the meeting, there's probably something wrong. I'm probably not prepared well enough, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Mark, this has been a strong conversation. You've shown how disciplined sales, leadership, clear diagnoses, and proper infrastructure can change the trajectory of a company. Your experience helps leaders move from frustration to clarity. For our listeners who want to learn more, you can connect with Mark on LinkedIn or explore his work through Sales Acceleration. Thank you for joining me today, and thanks to everyone listening for being part of the Growth Ceilings community. Until next time, keep growing, keep leading, and keep breaking through. Thank you.
You've been watching the Growth Ceilings podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who's ready to grow.